Hey, what's going on, guys? This is a crash course on one of, if not the most important web development tool available, and that's Google Chrome DevTools. Now, all browsers, as far as I know, have their own set of developer tools, and a lot of the stuff we'll be doing here you can do in other browsers, but not all of it. And if you're a web developer, I'd highly suggest using Google Chrome, at least for development. What you use to browse web pages and so on doesn't really matter. But for development, I'd suggest Chrome. Second to that, I would say Firefox. Now, Chrome Tools is very powerful. There's a lot of real advanced stuff that you can do, especially when it comes to debugging in JavaScript. I'm not going to get into the real advanced tasks in debugging because I don't want to focus too much on pieces of code rather than dev tools themselves. Also, I want this to be a beginner to intermediate friendly tutorial or crash course. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started. I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, MailTag. MailTag is a Chrome extension that allows you to track your emails in real time for free. It also lets you track other cool things like link clicks, email reopens, and even the device that was used to open your emails. Be sure to check out MailTag by clicking the link in the description below. Alright guys, so the website that we're going to be working with for the first part of this crash course is from the Bootstrap 4 Udemy course. It's the MIZUXE theme. It's just a one-page theme that uses Bootstrap. You can see the menu items just take you to that part of the theme. Alright, so I think it's just a good example to work with. So to open our dev tools or Chrome tools, whatever you want to call them, there's a few different ways. We can go to the menu here, we can go to more tools and then developer tools, and that will open them up. We can also toggle with F12, and we can also use Control-Shift-I. Alright, so those are some ways that we can open up the dev tools. Now, there's a lot of different tabs here. We're not going to go over all of them. In fact, if you click over here and you go to more tools, there's even more stuff. But what we're going to really look at is elements, console, the JavaScript console, sources, network, and application. We're not going to really work with memory management and stuff like that. That's beyond this tutorial. All right, so we're basically going to be working with the most common types of tasks that people use. So what we're going to do before we look at the Elements tab is I'm going to show you how we can move this around. So by default, it's going to be at the bottom, but if you want it on the side, you can go ahead and do that. If you want it on the left side, you can do that. And if you want it undocked completely, you can do that. So it's another window. I think what I'm going to do is try it on the side just to kind of, so you guys can see what's going on a little better. Usually I have it at the bottom, but we're going to give this a shot. So before we look at the elements and inspection, let's click on this little icon right here. This is the device. This will allow us to look at our site on different devices and different sizes. First, I'm just going to choose responsive, and basically this is 1024 by 1745. So this is like a laptop view, but if we want to go mobile, we can click right here, and this will give us like a mobile view. If we want to click right here, this will give us a larger mobile. This will give us a tablet view, and then we can choose actual devices as well. So if I want to see what this looks like on an iPhone 6, we can do that. Okay, we can use the little menu here. If we wanted to look at on, let's say, a Galaxy S5, it's a little different, but not much, and it shouldn't be much different. But you can do that. You can change it from landscape to portrait. So it's a nice little tester to see what your site looks like on mobile devices and tablets. All right, so let's go ahead and close that up. We'll just click that icon again, and now we're going to look at the element inspector, okay, or the elements tab. Now, all of this right here is the source code. This is the HTML, and then down here we have the CSS for whatever is selected here. Notice that when I hover over an element, it kind of highlights in the browser. And you'll see that it has sometimes it'll have a green bar around it, sometimes it'll have an orange bar around it. What this is padding and margin. So this nav bar right here, if I just click and select it, you'll see that it has green border around it. This is the padding. If I go over let's go and showcase, and let's hover over container, you'll see that there's actually orange on the side as well. That's the margin. A container has margin auto, meaning that it puts the same amount of margin on both sides, and that's what you're seeing. It also has a little bit of padding, so it has the orange and green. Okay, now let's say we want to select an item in the browser and then have it highlight over here, so basically the opposite. What we can do is click on this little icon here, this arrow in the box, and then we can go and we can select what we want. So if we want to select this H1 right here, we can go ahead and click it, and it'll bring it to us over here in the Elements tab. All right, and while this is selected, down here it'll show us any CSS that pertains to that element. So notice that this H1 has a class of display2, it has a class of MT5 and PT5, which are all bootstrap classes, by the way. A lot of the stuff we're going to see are bootstrap classes. So if we go down here, it'll actually give us the styles for PT5, MT5, display2, H1 itself, anything that pertains to this selector right here. Okay, not only that, but it shows us the file that it comes from and then the line number where the style is. And if I click on this, it'll open that up. It'll show us Bootstrap CSS with that style. And then we can just close that up and go back to Elements. And we have a checkbox next to these styles here, so this padding top. If I uncheck that, it's going to go ahead and remove that class from that, or it's going to toggle it, that style, from that element. Okay, or not only from that element, but anything that has the PT5 class. You'll see that underneath the newsletter, this actually has it as well, so that's changing too. So we can toggle our classes. Now let's say we only wanted to toggle it from the H1. So what I'll do is inspect the H1. So it's selected right here, and then we'll go down here and we'll say element classes, and then we'll toggle the PT5. Now you can see that it's only removing it from that element. It's not just taking away all the PT5s. So let's go ahead and let's focus on up here for a little bit. We'll focus on the markup. Now we can change things. So let's say we wanted to change the text of this H1 right here. What we could do is double click the text, and I'm just going to replace it with hello world and enter, and you'll see it'll actually change the text. Now this isn't going to stick, this is temporary. If I reload the page, that's going to go away. Obviously, otherwise we'd be able to just, you know, mess with anyone's website, and we'd have quite a crisis. Now later on, I am going to show you how you can add your local workspace to Chrome so that you can edit things and they will stick, and the changes will stick. So you can use the dev tools as an actual text editor. But of course, it has to be added as a local workspace. All right, now text, the inner text isn't the only thing we can change. If we wanted to, let's say, change something in here, we could double click, we could add a class. Let's just add a class of, let's say, special. Doesn't do anything, but I'm just showing you we can add it. In addition to doing it that way, we can right click and we can say add attribute. And let's say we wanted to add an ID here, so we'll add an ID of heading. Okay, so we can do it that way as well. And then we can change this if we want. We can change the value. We can change the actual attribute. So if I wanted to change this to, let's say, title, we could do that as well. All right, we can remove stuff from the DOM. So let's see, I'm going to click inspect, and I'll go to the little MIZUXE right here, the H3 and the logo, and we can go ahead and we can either choose hide. Now hide is going to make it so we can't see it, but it still takes up the space. In fact, this probably isn't a good element to show you this on. Let's actually go to the paragraph right here, and we're going to choose hide. And notice that the space is still there as if the paragraph was still there. We just can't see the content. And notice that when it's hidden, you'll have this little dot right here. So we can unhide it, and then if we want, we can also delete it. So if we say delete element, it'll completely remove it from the DOM, and now that space is gone. Okay, we can also move things around. So let's choose this little logo right here, this M logo. It's an image tag, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say copy, and we can say copy element, and then we'll go down to, let's say, the footer, and we'll go into the container, and we will do copy and then paste element. And then let's right click and say scroll into view. It'll bring us down, and now you can see we have the little logo down here in the footer. All right, now we can also click and drag. So if we wanted to bring it like up here, we can just drag it all around wherever we want. There it is right there. All right, so another thing we can do is we can see different states of elements. So see this button here, if I hover over it, it gets a gray background. If we want, we can select this. Let's click inspect and click the button, and then we'll go over here and we'll right click and let's check off hover, and then it'll display that as the hover state. Okay, and you can see it adds a little dot here to tell you that it's in the hover state. And it's not just hover, we can also do active and focused and what else, visited. So you can change the states like that. All right, and then as far as this menu, let's see, we covered pretty much everything. Expand all if we want to expand everything that's in the tree here, and we can collapse all. All right. So now let's move on to messing with styles. So I'm going to just pull this up so we can see the CSS. Now let's go to the nav bar. So this right here. And as I showed you, we can change things like in the class here. Bootstrap 4 has a class of navbar light. What that does is it makes the text dark. I know that sounds a little weird, but it's basically saying the navbar has a light background, so the text should be dark. So what I'm going to do is change this to navbar dark. Enter, and now you'll see that the text is now gone. It's not gone, but it's white because it thinks the navbar has a dark background. So that's one way we can change and add classes. Another way is we can go down here, make sure you have the element selected, and we can go to this .cls and we can add a new class here. We can also, as I showed you before, we can toggle. So for example, we can toggle that navbar dark class. But let's go ahead and add a different background color to this. So Bootstrap has a class called bginfo, which will give it a blue background. So I'll go ahead and type, and notice as I start typing, it'll pull up all the classes that are in the Bootstrap CSS file. So any CSS file you have connected, it'll automatically kind of search the classes. So let's use bg-info, hit enter, and it'll add that as a class. Okay, so notice that the background of the navbar is now blue. Now another thing, if we go down to the CSS here, we can change things like, let's see, bginfo right here. So that we have this color, it shows us the color, and if we click on it, we have a nice little color picker, and we can change the color that way as well. So if we wanted to change it to like, I don't know, to like a reddish color like that, we could go ahead and do that. If we wanted to change up here, the navbar class has a box shadow, we could go ahead and change that color. So if we wanted to make that like a red, and we also have an eyedropper tool, which if we click that, we can just pick colors in here. Okay, we'll choose that black color, I guess. And then to change numeric values, we can actually, let's see, go like that. And I can just go ahead and click the up arrow, up or down arrow, and that'll change that value. Okay, it'll increment or decrement it. All right, so we can do stuff like that, which is really cool. We could do it with the opacity as well. Let's see, for the colors, I never tried that, but does that do anything? No. I didn't know if it would increment the hexadecimal in some way, but I guess not. All right, so let's see what else. We can also add new styles. Okay, with this plus button right here. So let's say we want to choose the body. The body has an ID of home, so it'll create a style for exactly what this is. Okay, so if I click this new style rule, it'll create a style for body home, and we could say like background. Let's say background black, and that'll automatically change to black. All right, I know this looks horrendous, but I'm just trying to give you some examples of how this stuff works. All right, now let's choose the showcase. Let's see, so showcase right here, section showcase, and then I'm going to click on computed, And this shows us the box model. So it gives us the width and the height of the element, gives us the padding, the border, the margin, and any positioning that it has. All right. In addition to that, if we go down here, it gives us all the specific styles for this element. Okay. So for instance, background image. If I go ahead and I expand that, it'll show us the actual image, and we can open this if we want. If we want to open in a new tab. Users Brad sandbox image. All right, so I guess that's not working. It's not getting the right path because it's on. We're loading this from our file system, not an actual web server, so it's not showing the actual image. But it would if we were on a real web server. All right, so let's see what else. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, this right here, this hover. So let's select this button right here, and notice that down here it's going to give us the default for just the regular button style. But if we want to look at the hover style, we can go ahead and click on that, and then click hover or active or whatever, and it'll show us that style. Okay. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to see that hover style. Okay, so we can choose active, that'll show us active, and so on. All right, let's see, we can also filter. So if we want to look at color, it'll show us anything to do with color. We can also search classes like bg.bg, or maybe it doesn't search classes. I don't know. I don't really use this, but I guess you can search for just paddings, any styles for that particular element. All right, so that's going to do it for the Elements tab. Now we're going to move on to the console. All right, guys, so for this part of the course, what I've done is I've created a single index HTML file inside a folder called DT Sandbox, DevTool Sandbox, and I've just added just some basic HTML. We just have our head tag, and then we have an H1 in the body. So over here in the console, make sure you have the console tab highlighted. You can actually run JavaScript here. So if we were to say alert 1 and enter, you'll see that it'll execute that JavaScript. Now when it gives us undefined back, that just means that there's no return value. Now we can type expressions in here. For instance, even if I just put like a 1 and enter, it'll give us a 1 back. If we do, let's say 1 plus 3, it'll give us 4 back. Now there's also little symbols that I'm going to show you throughout the course as well, throughout this section. One is going to be $_ What that'll do, if I click enter, it'll give us the last returned value from the last expression. All right, now this button here will clear the console. And now if I do the $_ it's going to give us undefined because it cleared everything out. Okay, another symbol we have is $0, 1, 2, and so on. And what that does is it'll show us the last elements selected with the inspector. All right, so right now if I say $0 it gives us undefined. Let's go ahead and click inspect, and let's inspect this H1 right here. All right, I'm just going to click on it, and then we'll go back to the console and let's say $0, and you'll see that it'll give us the H1. All right, if we select something else like the HTML, you can see right here it's telling us we're just selecting the HTML element. We'll go back to console, let's do $0, we get HTML. All right, now if we do $1, we get the DevTools because that was the one we selected before that. If we do $2, we'll get undefined because we did not select anything before that. The H1 was the first thing that we selected. All right, now you can also use the $_ as an alias for document.querySelector. So it works just like jQuery, although it's not jQuery. So what I'm going to do is just cancel this out or clear this. And let's say document dot, not get, we want document dot query selector. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Query selector, and we want to grab the H1, and let's say dot style dot color equals red, and then enter, and that'll actually change it to red. Now document.querySelector is just vanilla JavaScript. Now we can use the money sign as an alias for a query selector. So we can essentially use jQuery. It's not jQuery, but it's the same format. So we can say h1, we can say dot style dot color equals blue, and that'll change it to blue. Okay. Now if I reload this, it's going to of course go back to normal. Another thing I want to show you is that you can open the console from any tab. If we're in Elements and you want the console open, you can do a Control Shift J. No, I'm sorry, Control Shift J will just open the console up from nothing. To open up the console drawer, then you want to do what the hell is it? It's just Escape. If I click Escape, you'll see that this opens. We get this What's New. I'm going to close that out. And then we have the console down here, okay, in addition to the Elements tab. But I'm just going to go right back to the console. All right, we'll get rid of that. All right, so now let's move over to the file, and let's see some things we can do over here. So what I'm going to do is add some script tags. And if you guys have watched any of my videos at all, I do a lot of JavaScript, and you'll see me lots of times use console log. That's how we can do testing. That's how we just, if we want any output from our application, we use console log. Now, in my case, this is going to auto load. I'm not going to even have to reload because I'm using a plugin here called Live Server for Visual Studio Code. So if you're not using that, you will have to, and you're following along, you will have to reload. So that's just logging something to the console. All right. Now the console also gives us errors. Okay, any errors. So if we, for instance, say console.log, and we try to pass in a variable called myvar that is not declared, and we go ahead and run it, we're going to get this uncaught reference error. Myvar is not defined. Okay. In addition to that, it's going to give us the file name. It's going to give us the line number that threw the error. So if I go ahead and click that, it'll open up, that part of the file, and it'll show us what caused that error. All right, so let's go back to console, and I'm just going to comment this out. Now we can also throw our own errors in our scripts. So if we say console.error, and we can say this is an error, and save, and you'll see it'll run, and it looks just like an error. It'll also show us the line that caused it. All right. In addition to errors, we can do warnings. So console.warn. We'll say this is a warning, and save. And it basically does the same thing, except it's yellow, has a little exclamation mark instead of an X. All right, so let's take a look at some other console commands. We have the console.dir command, and that's basically going to show us a JavaScript representation of any DOM element. So let's put in the actual document here and save, and then we'll get this hash document. But if we click on this arrow, it'll show us everything about the document. Okay, and we can access any of this. For instance, if we wanted the URL, we could say console log, and we could say document.url. Let's actually comment this out and save and reload. Oh, we don't have to reload, but it'll show us the URL, so we can get any value from that document object. And if you're interested in more of this kind of stuff, looking at the document, looking at the DOM, check out my DOM crash course. It's a four video course on YouTube, absolutely free, and you might want to check that out. All right, so another thing we can do is we can create tables in the console with arrays. So for instance, let's say console table, and we're going to put in some brackets, and let's add an object. We'll put a name of John, email, let's say test@test.com, and we'll put an age of 33. All right, so let's save that, and you can see it actually creates a table. Okay, so we could add more objects to this array, and it would add it to the table. All right, and another thing I wanted to show you is that we can filter some of this stuff out if we want. So you'll see we have info, warnings, and errors checked off. Now the table is considered info, so if I go ahead and I click that, it'll hide it. If we want to not show warnings, it'll hide the warning. And you'll see now it says errors only. If I uncheck errors, it won't show that at all. It says hide all. So we can filter the type of logs that are going to show down here and the types of errors and warnings and stuff. All right, so another command we have is console.clear, and I'm sure you can guess what that does. It just clears the console for us. All right, so let's go ahead and comment this stuff out. By the way, to do that, I do Control /. And then I want to show you that we can actually log stuff in groups. So if we say console.group, and we give this a name, let's just call this say hello. And then down at the bottom here, we want to say console.groupEnd. And here we'll say hello, same thing, it's kind of an identifier. And then in here, let's just do console log. We'll say hello, John. Copy that, paste in 2 more. We'll say hello, Sally, and hello, I don't know, Chris. Let's save it and run it. And you'll see that now all of these logs are put into a group, this say hello group, which we can actually collapse and uncollapse. All right, so we can do that. Another thing we can do is we can do a console time. So let's go ahead and say console.time. Give this an identifier. We'll call it for loop. And then down here we'll say console.timeEnd. And also pass in for loop. And this can be anything, the for loop. That's just what I'm calling it because that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm just going to do a simple for loop here. So we'll say var I equals 0 as long as I is less than, let's say, 2000. And then we'll do I plus plus. And then let's just go ahead and console.log I. And let's save. And now it'll actually run the loop. It'll count through 0 to 2000 or 1999. And then it'll tell us the identifier and then how long it took to do that. So it took it 108 point this milliseconds. All right, so that is console.time. We can also run assertions, which are basically kind of like tests. So let's create a function here. We'll call it greater than. And it's going to take in 2 values. Let's say x and y. And we're going to say in here console.assert. So console assert, and then the condition, which is going to be is x greater than y, and then it'll take a second parameter of an object, and we're going to put a message in here. Actually, this needs to be JSON, so we're going to wrap this in double quotes and say message, and we'll say let's see, x is not greater than y. All right, and then we can pass in the third parameter here, and we're going to say that x is whatever is in the x variable, whatever's passed in, and we'll put a comma, and we'll say y is whatever's in the y, and that'll display in the actual message. All right, so then we just want to run this. We'll say greater than, and let's make sure that the first one is not greater than the second one, so we'll do 4 or 5. Oops, and that'll make it fail. And we'll save, and you'll see we get assertion failed, message x is not greater than y, and then it shows us the actual values of x and y. So we can run little assertions and tests with our console. All right, and if I were to put something that was greater than, like put 6, then nothing's going to happen, okay? It's not going to say passed or anything like that. It just, nothing will happen. All right, so I think that that's good enough. I don't want to go too deep into this console stuff here. Now, you do have some settings here. You can choose to show timestamps with your logs. You can choose to log any ajax requests, preserve the log, selected context only. You can hide networks, messages, user messages only, which will only show messages from console API methods. So you do have some settings there, but I think that's going to be it for the console. So let's move on to the sources tab. So in sources, first thing I'll show you is that you can actually create snippets. So if I go to snippets here, let me just remove this one, but we can go ahead and click new snippet and you can name it. Let's call it log text. And what I'm going to do is just have this console log, and we'll just say hello world. All right, and then we can do Control S to save. We can also right click and save. Okay, and then to run it, we can just go ahead and click run. And now down here, you'll see the console draw pop up and it'll run hello world. All right, so you can put whatever you want in these little snippets. It's just like a little snippet manager. The cool thing about this sources tab is that we can actually make it so that we can edit our code, and we can use it kind of as a text editor. So what I'm going to do is make this a little bigger, and we need to go to sources, and we're going to just right click here. Now, I mean, if we go over here and we click index.html, we can see the source code here, but we can't change it and save it and stuff like that. So what we'll do is we're going to add a workspace. So we see add folder to workspace. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the folder that this HTML file is in, which is going to be in my SANDBOX, I believe. SANDBOX and then DT SANDBOX. All right. And then it's going to come up with a pop-up that says DevTools requests full access to DT SANDBOX. We're going to go ahead and allow it. And now we have it in here, and we can actually edit stuff. So if we go ahead and change, let's change the H1. We'll say DevTools Playground, and we'll do a Control S, and you'll see that it'll change here. And then if I reload, it stays changed. And if we go over to our file in VS Code, and let's actually just, I guess having it open. Let me see, can I reload this? Let's just close it and say don't save, and then we'll reopen it, and it's DevTools Playground. All right, so we can now use this as our text editor. Now we can add files. So let's say new file, and let's call this, let's see, I haven't done this too much, but let's see, how do I name this? Rename, we'll call it style.css, and we'll just put in here body, let's say background, we'll do a light gray, and save. We'll close that up, we'll go over here and we'll add it. Okay, let's save it, and there we go. Now we get a dark background, and you can see it actually updated over here. We now have our link to our style sheet. It also created it over here. All right, so now let's move on to the network tab. All right, now the network tab, if I go ahead and reload, this is going to basically show us all of the files that are loading in this URL. So we have our index.html file, we have our style.css, and it's basically telling us that the index.html gives us the size, it gives us the time that it takes to load, and then it gives us this little graph here as well. And then we can filter the types of resources. So let's say we only want to look at CSS, it'll show us the style.css. If we want to look at docs, which is, you know, HTML files, it'll show us that. We can also see any XHR request or ajax request, which I'm going to show you in a second. Now this WS right here, this is the WebSocket, and what this pertains to is the live server that I'm using. Okay, so that's why we see this WS here. The live server is what enables us to have this auto load and stuff. All right, and if we click all, of course, we can see everything. And if we select each one, we can see the headers, gives us the request method, so get requests, the status, the address, all that stuff, the headers, If we click on preview, we can see the actual content. Same with response, cookies. I do actually have a cookie in there, but that's from something else. And then timing, so it shows us the timing, the time it took to load and stuff like that. All right, now what I want to do is I want to add an ajax request to our script over here. So I'm going to put in a button right here, and we're going to say get users, and I'm going to just grab, well, first I'm going to add an event listener. So I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to say document dot get, actually we'll just say query selector. We want to select the button, and let's say we want query selector button, and we want to add an event listener. We want to listen for a click, and then we want to call a function called get users. Actually, we don't need that. All right, so then we'll create a function called get users, and then what this is going to do is it's going to fetch data. It's going to fetch the GitHub users, and this is from my Ajax crash course. So I'm going to paste this in, and it's basically just a regular vanilla JavaScript XHR request to api.github.com/users, and we're just checking to see if the status is equal to 200. Everything's okay. Now I don't care about the output, so I'm actually going to get rid of I'm going to get rid of all this. Actually, I didn't even need to paste that in, but we'll just say console.log users returned. All right, so let's go over here and let's first of all go in the console and click, and we get users return. Now if we go back to network and reload, you'll see we just have our index and style and our WebSocket, and then if I click the button, all of a sudden we see users. This is the Ajax request. If we look at type, it says XHR, and if we filter by XHR, we'll see the users file here, or the users request, and it gave back a status of 200. And if we click on this and bring this up, you can see that it was a GET request, and we can look down here. It gives us the request headers, and now if we look at the response, it'll actually show us what it gives us. So making a request to that URL right there gives us the first 100 users of GitHub, and you can see it gives us the username, the ID, the avatar URL. It gives us a bunch of other URLs like the followers, the gists, the repos that the user has. So that shows us the response. All right, same thing with preview, just shows us in a different way. Okay, and we can do whatever we want with this data that's brought in, but the point of me doing this is to just show you that any Ajax requests that are made are going to get added to this network tab, and we can view those requests. Okay, this XHR here, this stands for XML HTTP request, which is part of the browser that allows us to make asynchronous Ajax calls, or I should say asynchronous JavaScript calls or Ajax calls, same thing. Now notice the load time here, 16 milliseconds. If I reload it, it'll change, a little bit from time to time. But let's go ahead and let's uncomment our little loop here, this console time loop thing, just because I want to run that loop. And let's save. And now when we reload, you'll see that it's 123 milliseconds because this loop took up some time because we're taking and we're logging out to the console. Let's change this to, let's say, 20,000 and save. And now let's look at the network time. And now we get 1.08 seconds. All right, and you can see up here that the graph is much different. It's now up, in between 1,000 and 1,200. If I bring this back down to 2,000 and save, now we're down to, just above 150 milliseconds. Okay, and the more code you have, the more files you have, the longer it's going to add to your load time. So let's take a look at the Bootstrap theme that we used in the first part. All right, so if we go ahead and we open up, close that up, and we reload the network, you'll see that this took not bad. It took 189 milliseconds to load. DOM content loaded took 51 milliseconds. So a lot of this stuff was added from like images. So when you have large images, that really slows your site down. It loaded all the CSS files, all the JavaScript. So we have the bootstrap JavaScript, Popper, and jQuery, which are dependencies of JavaScript. So it has to load, it has to take all of this stuff into account when loading your site. All right, so if you have an image-heavy site, it's good to compress your images or resize them and optimize them before, before uploading them to your website. But I think that's it. That's all I want to do for the network tab. Now we're going to move on to the application tab. All right, so the application tab is what's going to show us, we can look at what's in our browser storage, and there's multiple ways to store data inside of a browser. Okay, so we have local storage. Now I've cleared everything out. You can actually completely clear everything from this tab here. You can clear your site data, but we can look at local storage, session storage. IndexedDB and WebSQL are basically like client-side in-browser databases. And then we have our cookies. We also have cache storage, application cache. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to our file here into our script tags, and I'm going to add a local storage value, okay, through JavaScript and HTML5. So to do that, we can say local storage, and to set an item, we can say set item. And let's go ahead and set, let's say, name, and we're going to set that to John, and save. And now if we reload our application and we look under local storage and we click on our local host, you'll see that now we have a key of name and a value of John. All right, and we can get this from our JavaScript really easily too by just saying local storage.getItem, and we want to get name. So what we'll do is we'll just console.log that and save. And if we open up our console over here down at the bottom, you'll see we get John. All right. Now, the difference between local storage and session storage is that local storage will stay in your browser. It'll stay on your machine until it's cleared. Okay, and I can clear it from the JavaScript, or you can clear it from here. So to clear it from JavaScript, we can say, we can say local storage dot, and then we can say clear, and we'll pass in here name. All right, so now if I save that and reload, you'll see that it disappeared. It was set, but then it was cleared. So we can do it that way. If I go ahead and I comment this out and run it, then it gets set again. But we can go over here and we can refresh if we want, and we can also get rid of it. All right, so local storage will stay until that happens. Now session storage has the same API, the same syntax really, except that it goes away when your browser's closed or when your session ends. So what I'll do here is I'll say session storage, and it has the same methods, so set item, and let's set, I don't know, we'll set car, and we'll set that to, let's say, BMW, and we'll save. And John got added again because we still have this line here. But if we look at session storage, we now have this car BMW. All right, and you can clear it out, and you can fetch the session storage the same way. It's basically the exact same API. It's just that it'll go away when the browser's closed and when the session ends. All right, now we can also track cookies. So if we go down here, let's go ahead and create a cookie. To do that, we can say document.cookie, and we'll set that equal to, let's say, username equals John Doe, and save. And now you can see that a cookie's been added. If I just make this a little bigger, So a cookie's been added for this domain. That's the value of it. This is the name. It doesn't have a max. It doesn't expire, so it expires when the session ends. You can add an expiration, but I'm not going to go through that. I don't want this to be a tutorial on cookies. I'm just trying to show you that you can track and you can see your cookies from this domain here. All right. And of course, you can go ahead and you can clear these out. You can go one by one like that, or you can just go to clear storage and select what you want cleared, and then just go ahead and clear everything, and you'll see that everything is gone. All right, so that's how you can manage your browser storage. I'm not going to go over like IndexedDB and WebSQL. Those are different technologies that I don't want to get into. But just know that you can see that stuff from here as well. All right, now I want to take a look at the Audits tab. So this will allow us to perform an audit that will basically give us some ratings on our website about the performance. It'll give us some suggestions to make it perform better, things like that. Now, you also need to take into account the server that you're on. So what I've done is I've uploaded this MIZUXE template to a domain called codeskillet.com, which is being hosted at I think it's HostGator. I think it's a shared hosting account, so that may have an effect on it. But let's go ahead and just perform an audit. So we're going to open up Chrome Tools and go to Audits and click Perform Audit. And I'm going to choose all of these except for the Progressive Web App and click Run Audit. All right. And this may take a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video until this is done. All right, so we get the results back for this website uploaded at codeskillet.com. So we got 88 for performance, which isn't bad. Accessibility was 86, best practices 77. And I can tell you that a lot of this performance and best practices is going to come from the images, because the images were not optimized or compressed or anything like that. So let's go down here. This will tell us about page speed. The first meaningful paint was 2.2 seconds or 2,240 milliseconds. And what this means is first meaningful paint measures when the primary content of a page is visible. All right, the first interactive was 4.1 seconds. This is the first point at which necessary scripts of the page have loaded and the CPU is idle enough to handle most user input. So this is like when the site is completely ready. This is when it's basically loaded enough for the user to view the whole page, which isn't too bad. Now opportunities, you'll see serve images as WebP. So basically this is telling us to compress our images with lossy or lossless. Properly size images. Yep, optimize images. So you can see that this all has to do with these images, because these are really high quality images, and we have a potential savings over here of 68%, 73%. So that's what most of this this lacking performance is, and it's still not bad. 3 past audits, which are reduce rendering block scripts. We avoid excessive DOM size. Okay, so our DOM size isn't too big. User timing marks and measures 0. Let's see, accessibility. Now I didn't use a lot of area attributes in the course that we built this theme, because I didn't want to add more. I mean, it was a 9-hour course and I wanted to focus on classes and stuff, so we didn't really focus on adding accessibility options. Let's see, color contrast is satisfactory. 6 past audits. Elements used attributes correctly. The area attributes that we did use do follow best practices. Elements describe contents well. Elements are well structured. Page specifies valid language. Meta tags are used properly. Okay, so best practices. We had 3 failed audits. Does not use HTTPS. Obviously, that's fine. Does not use HTTP2 for all of its resources. Manifest short name will be truncated when displayed on home screen. Let's see, past audits. So we avoid application cache, avoids WebSQL DB. WebSQL is deprecated, so that's not a good thing. You don't want to be using that. Passive listeners, avoids mutation events in its own scripts, avoids document.write. You should never use document.write. opens external anchors using the rel no opener, avoids requesting geolocation permission, avoids deprecated APIs, allows users to paste into password fields. All right, so all of those are checked off. So all in all, I think this is a pretty good audit, except for the images. The images should be compressed and optimized. All right, so that's what I get from this. But again, this is a pretty cool tool if you want to go to your websites or your applications and run audits and stuff. I would encourage you to do that. All right, but I think that's going to be about it. If we go to security, it's going to tell us this page is not secure just because we don't use I don't have an SSL certificate on this domain. If we did, then it would say it's secure. All right, so I think that's it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, leave a like. Please subscribe if you're not, and I will see you next time. So I just want to give another shout out to MailTag, who sponsored this video. MailTag is a free Chrome browser extension that allows you to track your emails in real time. I've been using it myself for about a week now, and I can't recommend it enough. On top of email tracking, MailTag has a bunch of other features like desktop push notifications that alert you when your emails have been opened, link click tracking that shows if people have actually clicked on the links in your email, and a ton of other cool features. Again, all these features are completely free. Be sure to check out MailTag and click that link in the description.